I'd like to call to order this regular council meeting of the town of Saugeen Shores. The first order of business is a declaration of pecuniary interest, and I'll remind you of your responsibility to do so if and when it arises on the agenda. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Caught me daydreaming over here. Yes, I have a pecuniary interest with item 8.1, encroachment agreement with Highbury Farm Incorporated. I am an owner of Highbury Farm Incorporated.
Thank you. That's duly noted. We have no additions or deletions or amendments to the agenda, so the next item is adoption of minutes, and it's been moved by Councillor Minaj, seconded by Vice Deputy Mayor Huber, that Council adopts the minutes of the Council meeting of February the 8th, 2016 as presented. Is there any errors or omissions? Not. All in favor? That's carried. Next is Committee of the Whole minutes, and it's been moved by Councillor Grace, seconded by Councillor Mayette, that Council note and file the Committee of the Whole minutes of February the 8th, 2016. Any errors, omissions? All in favor? That's carried. Now, the next item on the agenda is a report of Committee of the Whole, and its first one is public notice report. And it's been moved by Councillor Rich and seconded by Deputy Mayor Charbonneau that the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores adopts the public notice report dated February the 8th, 2016, recommending that Council approve the municipal budget for the year of 2016 as follows. Expenditures are operating in reserves will be $24,399,114. Capital expenditures will be $7,903,185 for a total 2016 budget of $32,302,299. That will be supported by revenues on operating reserves of $13,599,285, capital $6,635,823 for a total $20,235,108. For a total municipal taxation will be $10,799,829, which capital will be $1,267,362 for a total 2016 municipal taxation of $12,067,191. That the Town of Saugeen Shores tax levy be set at $12,067,191 to finance the operating and capital budgets of the municipality for the year 2016. That this levy includes growth of $205,014 or 1.84%, and a levy increase of $645,890 or 5.80% for a total levy increase of $850,904. That the BIA levies for 2016 be set at $33,000 for the Port Elgin BIA and $29,350 for the Southampton BIA, and that the tax levy bylaw establishing the 2016 tax rates be considered by Council at a future date. Comments, questions? All in favor of the recommendation? Or the motion? Opposed, if any? That's carried. The next item is the Striking Committee report of February the 3rd, and it's been moved by Councillor Madison and seconded by Councillor Rich that Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores adopts the Community Services, Parks and Recreation report. I must have that wrong, do I? No, that's right, sorry. I jumped down on the agenda. I announced that this is a Community Services, Parks and Recreation report. I apologize. And it's been moved by Councillor Madison, seconded by Councillor Rich, that Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores adopts the Community Services, Parks and Recreation report dated February 8, 2016, recommending that Council endorse the waterfront maintenance plan as the minimum level of service to be provided to the Saugeen Shores waterfront. Any questions or comments to that motion? Not. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. The next item on the agenda is a report of municipal officers or committees, and it's the Municipal Heritage Committee report for February the 29th. It's been moved by Vice Deputy Mayor Huber, seconded by Councillor Minaj. The Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores adopts the Municipal Heritage report dated February the 29th, 2016, recommending that the 2016 Municipal Heritage Committee work plan be approved. Comments, questions? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. This is the Striking Committee report. It's been moved by Vice Deputy Mayor Huber and seconded by Councillor Madison that Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores adopts the Striking Committee report dated February the 3rd, 2016, recommending that Jerry Boucher be appointed to fill the vacancy on the Recreation and Active Transportation Advisory Committee. Comments, questions? All in favor? Opposed, committee, that's carried. Now, the next item I have is a motion. I notice a motion, and it's a motion this evening. And it's been moved by Deputy Mayor Charbonneau and seconded by Vice Deputy Mayor Huber. Whereas Council resolved on November the 23rd, 2015 to invite representatives of Unifor, STOP, and the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change to meet with representatives of the town of Saugeen Shores to discuss information related to the ongoing operation of the industrial wind turbine at the Unifor Family Education Center in Port Elgin. And whereas pursuant to that resolution, a meeting was held between the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, STOP, and the town representatives on February the 3rd, 2016, with Unifor declining to participate. And whereas during the meeting, the MOECC representatives advised that during the entire time that the Unifor industrial wind turbine has been operating, no acoustic audit or test has been done that would determine conclusively if the turbine was operating in compliance with the noise guideline for wind turbines or amended certificate of approval 3991-ZP8KPZ. And whereas the MOECC also advised that Unifor intends to voluntarily undertake an acoustic audit of this wind turbine in the spring of 2016 with the results expected in June. Now, therefore, the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores makes the following request of Unifor: that steps be taken by Unifor to inform the public of the dates during which testing related to this voluntary acoustic audit will be undertaken. 2, that the public be advised of any changes to the turbine's operation that may be required to successfully complete this acoustic audit. 3, that the results of this acoustic audit be made available to the town of Saugeen Shores and to the public as soon as possible after their audit results are available. And that Council makes the following request of the MOECC: that the MOECC requests that the Unifor make public the results of this voluntary acoustic audit. 2, that when the results of this acoustic audit are received by the MOECC, the Ministry inform the public of its conclusions regarding whether or not the turbine is operating in compliance with applicable guidelines and approval. And 3, that if results of an acoustic audit for the Unifor turbine have not been received by the MOECC before September the 1st, 2016, that the MOECC directs Unifor to undertake a mandatory acoustic audit according to the provisions of the amended certificate of approval 3991-ZP8KPZ. Questions or comments? We'll start here. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, this is another example on the same agenda where we have an issue with the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change not fulsomely enforcing the laws as passed. In this case, it's with regard to the operation of the Unifor turbine. This is about that certificate of approval and the limitations placed on the turbine with regard to how much noise it can produce. There have been hundreds of complaints about the operation of the turbine to date. There have been a number of tests, inconclusive tests, mind you, but tests with these handheld devices done by Ministry of officials which show the possibility, at least, that the machine is operating in exceedance, and still officials inside the ministry choose not or see no cause to order a mandatory audit. And what harm could be done by a mandatory audit? All that it would do would be to prove whether the thing is operating in compliance with the law or not. And yet it has not been completed, in spite of promises by the director inside the ministry, Doris Dumais, that such tests would be required. In spite of promises by Unifor that they would undertake these tests, they still have not been completed in the last couple of years since the turbine has been operational. This is extremely problematic because I think under the regulation, under the Act, under this certificate of approval, the public has been made a promise that these turbines will not operate above a certain noise emission level, and we have no way of demonstrating whether this thing is, in spite of all of these complaints. It's unacceptable, and it's a problem with the ministry, and the ministry needs to Unifor is going to voluntarily do this test. That's good. Hope that it gets done. If it doesn't get done, though, the ministry needs to finally step up and order it done, which is within their rights, and they have the power to do that. But ultimately, we need to get some certification by testing that this machine is operating according to the law, and hopefully the MOECC and Unifor will reply in the affirmative and the positive to these requests by this council, assuming this resolution passes, and we will get that information for this council and for the public. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that sunlight is the best disinfectant, especially in something like this if it's not working within compliance. But the one question I do have is, we seem to be going down these roads a lot. We see a lot of deputations from Greg. I wish I should have actually mentioned this to him when he's here. I want to hope that eventually we come to an end game, that we decide what we're gonna do and how we're gonna support this. Because I think that where we are right now, it just kind of still feels like we're spinning our wheels. And my big concern is when I look at that windmill and I think, okay, if something is found and the provincial government is in a position where they're forced to stop its operation or tear it down, that would just open up so much legal battles for them. So I can't see that it ever coming to fruition, if you know what I'm saying. So anyway, those are just my comments. I'm trying to figure out how this comes to an end.
I'll start down here. Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I speak in favor of this motion. And I would only add that I think that we should send a copy of this motion to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, and also circulate it to the members of the Rural Ontario Municipal Association, so that all other municipalities who may or may not be dealing with windmill issues and compliance issues with noise and the like can be aware of what's going on.
Thank you. Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. I was one of the number of town people that were at the meeting that was mentioned in the motion. What was really surprising, which is this is one way of resolving that, is there really has never even been the little handheld monitors held out there in the middle of the night. And when the ministry was asked, why have you not done nighttime readings? Oh, we've been out there at night, but then they mentioned a time of like 6 o'clock in the morning. So this kind of an audit, it just makes sense. So, and I think it is about time that we asked for it and demanded it, and it seems to be in the works. But if it doesn't happen, we remind the provincial government that it's within your right to demand that it happen, and we need that information, because it was glaringly obvious that there really are not realistic numbers to base any kind of an assessment on.
If you'll recall, I think when the thing was first commissioned, that we made a request of the CAW to do that, to give the town the resources to do this, and they said no, they would not do that. And it is. I agree with you. It is very disturbing, and they continue to say in their letter that we all know they're in compliance. And you're right, Deputy Mayor. We have no way of knowing they're in compliance until Antakuscotty has been completed. So, I think we need to move on this motion. Then, if there's no other discussion, all in favor. Opposed, if any, that's carried. Next is a motion, or it was a notice of motion and is now a motion. It's been moved by Councillor Mayette and seconded by Councillor Minaj. Whereas Ontario Power Generation has, and its predecessor company Ontario Hydro, has operated safely and as an excellent corporate citizen in ours and the neighboring communities for more than 5 decades. Throughout this time, having the highest regard for regulation and respect for environmental laws and protection. And whereas the proposed deep geologic repository solution for Ontario's low and intermediate level, nuclear waste, after more than a decade of rigorous, significant, and scientifically diverse investigation costing millions of taxpayers' dollars, a process that has been unbiased, thoroughly transparent, inclusive, and accommodating to every interest, concludes with a steadfast endorsement and a recommendation from the Federal Joint Review Panel that the project should proceed forthwith. And whereas the members of the Council of the Municipality of Saugeen Shores have availed themselves of the opportunity to review the findings of the joint JRP and have concluded that the scientific process used as a basis upon which this recommendation is made are sound, comprehensive, and thorough. And whereas the host community of Kincardine has recently declared that it should be clearly understood that the voices of the host municipality and the majority of the community should be given paramount consideration in this matter. Therefore, be it resolved that the duly elected council of the municipality of Saugeen Shores believes that the majority of its citizens support the findings of the joint review panel and therefore lends its unequivocal support for the proposed deep geologic repository for low and intermediate radioactive waste, and strongly encourages the Federal Minister of Environment and Climate Change to approve the project to advance to the next stages of development. Comments or questions? Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just before I make comments with the DGR, I would like to make a motion that we go past 10 o'clock.
We don't need that only if we start before 10. We need a motion to continue to past 11, and I was
11?
at 11 o'clock.
Let's hope we don't get there.
So hopefully we don't need that motion.
All right. All right, to the motion. Obviously, this is a very passionate issue for a great number of people, and when I proposed that motion, I did so in full knowledge of that, and I'm in one way encouraged by the great outpouring of response that has been caused by this, because I think it's something that we need to come to grips with, and the science and the politics and everything else aside, I think I would just like to state a couple of very simple reasons that I believe that this should go forward. And I'll also say I went through a lot of the correspondence, and believe you me, there has been a great deal of correspondence take place over the past couple of weeks, and I've read, with the exception of necessarily the form letters, which a lot of people put a lot of effort, and delegations today, both for and against, were obviously very well thought out, and for that I'm appreciative. And throughout that whole reading of correspondence and listening to delegations, I was very hopeful that I was going to find myself in a position where I had a tectonic shift of my paradigm that made me realize some sort of an aha moment, something that I've overlooked and something I'm just not seeing in the arguments that are against this motion. And I'm not surprised, but I did not find anything in any of the arguments that has caused me to think otherwise. And what it really comes down to for me, and it's not written in the motion here, is, and I think it was touched on tonight with Mr. Sutton's presentation, is we're not talking about the next 50 years or the next, we're talking about the last 50 years of waste that exists on the surface on the site over there. But we're not talking about the next 50 year, 100 years, or 1,000 years, or 10,000 years. We're talking about millennia in the future. And if an event was to take place today, and I'm not saying I'm not a doomsday person, but an extinction event is a real possibility in the world that we live in. And I'm sure the dinosaurs 50 million years ago didn't see it coming either, when either an asteroid hit the Earth or a catastrophic tectonic shift took place and caused an ice age or an extinction event to take place. And if that were to happen this year, next year, or 50 years, or 100 years from now, the people who are here won't have time at that point to think about all this nuclear waste that's essentially stored on the surface or very close to the surface. And if that extinction takes place, and as Mr. Sutton pointed out, if a glaciation event takes place, like has happened millions and millions of years ago again, and history has a habit of repeating itself, when of course we're not going to be here, and that glaciation takes place, and the surface is disturbed to the point that it was disturbed before, and new Great Lakes are formed, or new valleys are formed, and the receding takes place, and a new colonies of humans come to inhabit this area, and then they find out that the predecessing generations failed to do what was necessary and failed to take the adequate precautions of storing this stuff in a place that glaciation is not going to get a hold of it. And I believe that putting it in the very bottom is where it needs to go, because I share all of the concerns about the water. I share the concerns about the drinking water. I share the concerns about our pristine lakes, and I am in 100% agreement with everybody who spoke so passionately about this. And that is why I'm advocating for doing what we're doing. Because the way that it's stored now, and I've been there, and I didn't work for the waste management organization, but I'm familiar with ionizing radiation to the extent that it was my job for many years. And I understand how it works. And I don't want to see that stuff get put into the environment in any way, shape, or form. And the way that it's stored right now, although environmentally from storms or things like that is safe, it's still only just stored on the surface in warehouses. And I don't think that we're doing future generations any favors by ignoring this solution or putting this solution off to somebody in the future, or burying our heads and hoping that another way is found, or trying to get some other municipality somewhere else in Ontario to accept our waste that we generated and prospered from. So that's all I have to say. I'm supporting this motion still, and I turn it over to anybody else who wishes to speak.
Councillor Rich.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not actually going to talk too much about nuclear waste. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the motion. I received a number of emails, some for, some against, and I gave them all the same response, pretty much a form letter. And what I said was, last week the Federal Minister of Environment and Climate Change requested that OPG conduct 3 further studies into the Deep Geological Repository before making a decision on the environmental assessment. Now, I'm not going to read you what the points were, because I think everyone here probably knows what they were. And my question was, if OPG completes these tests successfully and the project is approved by the Federal Minister of the Environment and Climate Change, would you support it? Of all the emails that I responded to, I received about 10 additional responses talking about the question, and most of them were unequivocal no's with exclamation marks, saying under no circumstances would I ever support putting a repository close to the Great Lakes. We right now have a Liberal government that has a great deal of environmental credibility, I would say, and a fresh set of eyes that's looking at all the studies that have gone on for the last 15 years. And I don't believe that she's entrenched in the process. I believe that she will look at it with a very objective perspective. So she has asked for additional information. And I think that by saying no immediately, without actually looking at the new information that's coming out, or even saying yes immediately before that additional information comes out, is probably not the most prudent avenue to go on. This argument will take place, not now, but in 5 years and 10 years, as this project goes forward, and whatever we do with nuclear waste, be it high level, low, or intermediate level nuclear waste. But there's no pressure of time for us to make a statement today. We can wait and see all the information that comes forward and ask ourselves at that time if new information that has been presented will help change our perspective one way or another. So my motion, or my belief, would be that we should defer the motion and wait until we get that information in and then vote on it then. I'm sure everyone that's here tonight, or everyone that's made a statement about it, will still have their opinions, and they'll be able to bring that forward. I have this belief that individuals tend to live inside of their information silos, and they form an opinion, usually based on a gut reaction, and then they seek out information which confirms what they have already thought. So it's my hope that we can come to a central, more objective perspective on a whole, because the one thing about this project that I find most disconcerting is the way in which it has divided our community. And I'm a person that would like to see us build the community in a more positive light and in a more positive sense. And I hate when we are in a position where we're fighting against one another. Nevertheless, my motion would be to defer until we get all the information that the Environment Minister is looking for, and then make our decision at that point.
Councillor Rich, if Council, we would prefer that in a written form if you can, and we'll give you the time that you need if you have it, if you can get a seconder. During that, you go ahead. You should have. Got a copy? Here. Go ahead, Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
I keep a stash at the back of my drawer so Neil can't get them. So if you ever need a motion sheet, I have some over here. I would actually second that motion for this reason. I agree with a number of the items in the notice of motion and the way that it's worded here until the last paragraph. I feel strongly in support of the findings of the JRP. We have all lived through that process. So that little comment in the middle of the last paragraph, I'm okay with that. I also feel strongly, though, that the new minister, she hasn't had time to do her due diligence, and she hasn't had the benefit of the time that a lot of other people had. So I don't in fact, begrudge her taking a step back and saying it's going to take a little more time and asking for a couple of other pieces of information that fit in more with the way she sort of is looking at the issue. So I would second that motion, because to vote on the motion the way that it's worded here, I can agree with quite a few elements of it until that last paragraph. And I think as a council, whether or not you were on council, I think as a council we did support the findings of the JRP. So we did do that. And we indicated that support. I don't think that it's appropriate for us right now to do something like this when the process is moving along, and I don't see what the minister has said as being a negative. I see it as a positive, and I'm willing to wait. I don't know, I would second the motion to defer it, but quite frankly, if the motion came back worded the same way in the future, I probably would have some issues too, because the last sentence has some adjectives in there that don't necessarily fit in with the way that I think about this. But I do want to say that I do support the finding of the JRP. I think that was a long process, and I trust the science that came out of that, and I know some of the people that were involved in the work, and I think that what's gone on out at the site has been encouraging and appropriate. But given the other language in that last paragraph, I would, if I had to vote on this today, I would have to vote no because of the other language that's in there. But I do support the findings of the JRP, so that's why I would second John's motion, Councillor Rich's motion.
Question of clarification. Is the Vice Deputy Mayor referred to council supporting the findings of the JRP? Is that going to be in this motion?
Why don't we'll wait and see. We'll see till we. Okay. Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe this is an appropriate time to make a comment for the record, just so that everyone knows. I seconded the motion and I stand by it. And I have some real quick points. Status quo is not the answer for me. I've had an office sitting right beside the spent fuel in a concrete silo, and I've thought about it over and over again. And saying no to a DGR is one answer, but there has to be an alternative. It can't just be no. So for me, the DGR fits the need. I do agree with John Mann when he says we should just have one DGR, no more of this monkey business pretending that we're going to have maybe a Trojan horse. I certainly hope the government doesn't do that. And I recognize that could be 50 or 100 years from now. Somebody could change direction and say, hey, the one DGR has been built, let's put it all in there. I agree with doing it now. And I really feel that we should support our neighbors, our nuclear neighbors. We weren't in the position to be afforded the responsibility of creating a DGR in Saugeen Shores. I think there was a faulty mechanism there as well. I think that was exposed. I think it had a lot to do with the negative vote was well organized, and the political will was not there to take possibly the best site that exists right here in Saugeen Shores. And finally, I take some political license to say these things because I was an advocate, a pro-DGR advocate. I went before the JRP panel and I spoke in favor of deep geologic repositories, and I said that I had the backing of people. Subsequent to that, I stood for election and received almost 1,100 votes from the ward of Port Elgin. And I believe the majority of those votes are yes to a DGR. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Grace.
We have just a clarification, Mr. Mayor. Are we being allowed to speak on the general issue, or is this?
Yeah, I'm not going
Seems
to.
to
Yeah,
be-
you go ahead. You can go ahead. I mean, really, the procedure, we have a motion to defer, which would defer it to a point in time. But I know lots of people want to have a say here, so by all means, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, I do have a number of prepared comments about my concerns. I'll try to shorten them. I mean, one of the issues that I have a concern about is related to the science. And Mr. Sutton spoke tonight about being impressed with WIP. We know what happened there. There were 2 accidents in February of 2014 that resulted in environmental contamination. The main point about the WIP incident is that it occurred not because of some kind of diabolical plan by evil people. It happened because of human error. And that's one of my concerns with building a DGR deep underground. In the case of WIP, we were told by the Nuclear Waste Management Organization on behalf of OPG in 2011 that this was a wonderful project. This was a success story, that OPG was relying on WIP, that they visited many times, that they encouraged visits by the councils of Kincardine and Bruce County. And the Joint Review Panel visited in 2012 to see this model. Nevertheless, a human error occurred because of apparent incompetence and deceit, because of the fact that the kitty litter that was used to pack the drums in WIP exploded because somebody made a typo in a manual, which resulted in the substitution inadvertently of organic kitty litter for inorganic kitty litter, which caused the explosion. So my point is, human errors will occur. And I understand the points that my colleagues have made about the safety of putting something underground. My issue is putting it underground beside the Great Lakes. The JRP report itself says that it considers corrosive degradation of containers due to container material waste interactions to be a plausible scenario. I mean, WIP is still closed. There are 5,565 other barrels packed exactly the same way, sitting underground. It's going to cost $500 million at least to try to recover that and to try to get that facility back operating. With regard to transparency, I have a big problem with the wording of the resolution as it reads. You heard my questions to Mr. Sutton about the Kincardine consultation. One of the things in Mr. Sutton's presentation in the PowerPoint was saying that in the hosting agreement, that the payments to Kincardine and other municipalities are payments in lieu of taxes. In fact, there's nothing in the hosting agreement that mentions that phrase, payments in lieu of taxes. That's not in there. What is in there, 14 times in section 4.1 of the hosting agreement, is that there's a specification of acceptable conduct, best efforts, and types of support that are required for Kincardine and the adjacent municipalities to receive these annual and lump sum payments. There is something in the hosting agreement about municipal taxes for the Western Waste Management Facility, but it's only for Kincardine. The payments that we were getting from 2005 to 2013, those are in reward for being on best behavior and supporting the OPG project. And if one's motive going forward on this is the payments that we hope, or that one might hope that these payments are going to be reinstalled until 2035, consider this. According to the hosting agreement, here's what happens to the payments if there's a delay in the DGR having a license to operate by 2017 or being in service by 2018. Even if the license is constructed, if the license to construct is eventually granted, those milestones are not going to be met, obviously. This is not going to be in operation by 2018. And under the hosting agreement, OPG has the power to reduce or stop the payments altogether, whether the project commences at a date later than originally planned or not. And this is regardless, according to the hosting agreement, of whether the municipalities have been behaving as they are expected to do according to the agreement. To me, that's an immoral arrangement. Kincardine said that they based their agreement, they modeled it on the Port Hope agreement, which was instituted in 2001 and amended in 2009, except that the Port Hope agreement has nothing about behavior in exchange for millions of dollars that they were getting. They were getting the millions of dollars, but there was nothing in there about saying, you've got to support the projects. The hosting agreement was signed before the Kincardine community was polled, and at least Kincardine signed the agreement. We didn't. None of the adjacent municipalities signed the agreement, although what they were doing was promising best behavior for millions of dollars. But our population did not have an opportunity to sit and listen to a resolution being debated. The Saugeen Shores Committee of the Whole only expressed support by a show of hands just a couple of weeks before the hosting agreement was signed. There was never a resolution passed at that time. The only resolution passed up to this point in support of the low-level DGR was July 8th, 2013, just a couple of months before the Joint Review Panel hearings began. The wording of the resolution talks about transparency. It says, process is thoroughly transparent. A provincially appointed investigator determined in July 2014 that the Bruce County Council violated the Ontario Municipal Act by conducting a series of improper closed meetings with employees of OPG, NWMO, and the CNSC over an 8-year period. And according to OPG's own communication plan from 2009, the purpose of the meetings was to train the mayors to support the DGR project. These meetings were not announced to the public, minutes were not taken, and for the first 4 years, no notes were taken at all that we know of or that were ever presented to the JRP. The meetings were part of the process, but to say this was thoroughly transparent is completely inaccurate. Saugeen Shores, as we've heard, has never conducted a referendum. We may think that we understand the level of support or dissent on this issue, but without having a referendum, I don't see how we can really say we believe the majority of its citizens support the findings of the JRP, as the last clause reads. And the last clause also says, our council will provide unequivocal support. At least one councillor would vote no on this resolution, as it is written, and that is not unequivocal support. I'm not anti-nuclear, but I am against the idea of a DGR beside the Great Lakes Basin. The JRP itself stated in terms of alternatives that advances in waste treatment may lead to a future reevaluation of the necessity to retain such low-activity materials in a DGR. And we're being told that 80% is low level. They said some European countries have adopted options for low-level waste disposal that do not involve a DGR at all. So I applaud Minister McKenna's request for more information, especially on the issue of cumulative effects and the likelihood of a DGR for used fuel being located in our region, with 3 municipalities close by who are still being courted to be the host for a used fuel DGR. I think that's a very important issue, and this was a contingency that was disregarded by the JRP. So given that OPG must present new and significant information at a still undetermined future date, I think a deferral would be fine. Ultimately, I could not support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody's had a say, and I'm going to say just a couple of comments here before I read the motion. I fully understand that this has been an issue that has divided this community. But there's a number of things that have bothered me about it, is how almost it's been personal attacks nearly to the people that have been differing on both sides of this. And I know that will happen in public discourse. I wanted to address one thing about those closed meetings. They were a big issue, but on 17 times it was on the agenda of Bruce County Council, and not one time did any of these people that are making an issue out of this ask to speak to it. As if there is no everyone in this issue. It bothers me when we get to that there is somehow less than that anybody has some more moral authority or some more concern about their community than any of us. I share it with everybody, and I won't say anymore. I think that's enough. We've had enough. I'll go to the motion, and it's been moved by Councillor Rich and seconded by Deputy Mayor Charbonneau to defer the DGR motion until OPG brings forward the additional requested information by the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. Any questions or comments on this? All in favor? Opposed? That carries. And so we move on to the next item on the agenda. It's been moved by Councillor Minaj and seconded by Vice Deputy Mayor Huber that bylaw 24-2016, being a bylaw to authorize the entering into of an encroachment agreement with Highbury Farms Incorporated, is hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 29th day of February 2016. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. The next item then is to authorize. Oh, sorry, Luke. You're back in. The next item then is bylaw to authorize an agreement with Fisheries and Oceans and Port Elgin and Southampton Harbours, and it's been moved by Councillor Mayette, seconded by Councillor Grace, that bylaw 25-2016, being a bylaw to authorize a lease agreement with Her Majesty the Queen, represented by the Ministry of Fisheries and Oceans for the lease of the Port Elgin and Southampton Harbours, is hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 29th day of February 2016. Questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. It's the next item then is rezoning bylaw for 1931256 Ontario Limited, Grey Grenville Streets, and it's been moved by Vice Deputy Mayor Huber, seconded by Councillor Minaj, that bylaw 26-2016, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number 75-2016, being the comprehensive zoning bylaw of the Town of Saugeen Shores by 1931256 Ontario Incorporated for lands described as lots 31 to 36 Grey and Grenville Street, Southampton, Town of Saugeen Shores, is hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 29th day of February 2016. Questions or comments? Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
It's just a question for clarification. We will still, at a future meeting, receive the site plan, and there are still opportunities to contribute to site plan development. We're not, that's not, mine's on, maybe that's why. So that's to come, right?
Through Mr. Mayor, yes.
Councillor Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I've been asked to speak on this by several residents of the area. Not that they're opposed to the development per se, but to the density of the development. They're worried about the aesthetics of the street, of the neighborhood. We're putting in 52 houses where in 3 blocks there's not 52 houses in total. They're worried about traffic that will increase in the area. It's a quiet section of town. They're also worried about garbage and snow removal for that area. I know the planning committee has talked about most of this. Unfortunately, I misread one of the communications which said it was being deferred and missed the new meeting day for it. So the residents of the area have asked me just to mention this. I understand, as I said, the need for housing like this, but the density is a huge issue to many of the people in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, so we've heard the comments, and all in favor of the motion? Opposed? That carries. The next item on the agenda is an official plan amendment for 251 South Rankin Street, and it's been moved by Deputy Mayor Charbonneau, seconded by Councillor Madison, that bylaw 28-2016, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number 75-2016, being the comprehensive zoning bylaw for the town of Saugeen Shores, by Paul Eagleson for lands known municipally as 251 South Rankin Street, town of Saugeen Shores, is hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 29th day of February 2016. Comments, questions? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. The next item then is the rezoning for Hamilton on Eckford. And it's been moved by Councillor Grace and seconded by Councillor Myatt that by... Oh, did I do them both? Oh, okay, here. So I got the next one is the OP amendment. So the rezoning for 251. Here it is, yeah. Been moved by Councillor Myatt, or Deputy Mayor Charbonneau, seconded by Councillor Madison, the bylaw 28-2016, being the comprehensive zoning bylaw for the town of Saugeen Shores, by Paul Eagleson for lands known municipally as 251 South Rankin Street, town of Saugeen Shores, is hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 29th day of February 2016. Questions, comments? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Now we'll get to Hamilton. It's been moved by Councillor Grace, seconded by Councillor Myatt, that bylaw 29-2016, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number 75-2016, being the comprehensive zoning bylaw for the town of Saugeen Shores, by Joan Hamilton for lands described as Part Block B and Park Block 23, Plan 318, being Part 5, Reference Plan 3R5402, Geographic Town of Saugeen Shores, Town of Saugeen, Geographic Town of Southampton, Town of Saugeen Shores, is hereby read a first, second, and third time. Finally passed and sealed this 29th day of February 2016. Questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Next item is a confirmatory bylaw. It's been moved by Councillor Rich. I'm having some difficulty with those signatures. No, I just got to learn to recognize them a little better, John. Because there's two of them that are almost the exactly same scribble.
His wife's a doctor. Have it picked up.
Oh, I suspect that, eh? It's been moved by Councillor Rich, seconded by Councillor Madison, bylaw 30-2016, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores, is hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 29th day of February 2016. All in favor? That's carried. Been moved by Councillor Madison, seconded by Councillor Rich, that this regular council meeting of February 29, 2016 hereby adjourns at 10:30 p.m. All in favor? Here, thank you.